It's really lovely to see you all, and I'm really glad that everyone is so energised and has so much to discuss with each other, because I know we're going to have a really good discussion now, and obviously a really good discussion following this panel. But hello and welcome to our panel discussion. My name is Debbie Weeks-Bernard, and my cheeks are really burning. Pasha, I didn't realise you were going to do that introduction at the end, and so I'm deeply embarrassed. But I am Debbie Weeks-Bernard. I'm the new chair of the Trustee Board of Praxis, and I'm going to be the chair for the panel discussion for around the next 45 minutes. And we've got a really distinguished lineup of speakers who are going to be addressing some of the questions around the Nationality and Borders Act. And I had to stop myself by saying Bill, because I think there's an awful lot of us, probably a lot of us in this room, I know definitely all of the staff at Praxis and indeed the service users, and many other people who may not necessarily be able to have joined us but have got the same kind of sentiment, have been saying the Nationality and Borders Bill for some time. Given that it was a piece of draft legislation that was defeated 30 times in the House of Lords, but has unfortunately now been made into law. So we're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so just discussing what that means for Praxis as an organisation, and indeed other organisations who are working in the migrants, refugee, asylum space. But also importantly, and this is really important, because I have spent a long time, the majority of my life I think, working on issues which are probably often quite difficult and often quite contentious. It's really, really important when we're looking at something that is quite difficult as this Act, to be able to spend some time thinking about what happens next and what we can do to either mitigate what's included within it, what we can do to build alliances, coalitions, and what we can do to resist. And so hopefully by the end of the 45 minutes and the discussion that we're going to have, we'll all be feeling a little bit lighter, even though we're going to talk about a subject which is very difficult. But we'll be feeling a little bit lighter because hopefully we'll have some strategies, we'll have some ideas as to how we can move on from this, but also how we can work together to try to do our best to mitigate some of the provisions within the Act. So very shortly I'm going to introduce our three speakers. But I just wanted to paint just a very small picture, and I don't want to talk for too long because I want to make sure we can all hear from our speakers. So, Nationality and Borders Act, not bill, came into force in April. It is a piece of legislation which is going to create a two-tier system for those who are seeking sanctuary in the UK. And that's just one of the areas about it which is very problematic. So if you seek sanctuary in the UK and you come here independently, the kinds of protections and the rights that you will have available to you will be different to those who seek sanctuary in the UK via a government-backed scheme. And I know that there will be many of us who have been watching what's been happening in Ukraine, obviously over the past few months, and will know that some of the government-backed schemes to enable those who are fleeing that conflict and who wish to settle here in the UK are not necessarily working as well as they could do. So not only does the Act provide that two-tier system, but it also makes us rely on government-backed schemes which in and of themselves do not necessarily work as effectively as they could do. So what's important, I think, for those of us who are working in this space is to really be able to think about what are some of the best things that we can do to resist, but also to mitigate, because often when you have something which is government-driven and is almost out of your control, you have to think about the word mitigate. But there's an awful lot of lobbying, there's an awful lot of advocacy, there's an awful lot of work, I think, that can be done and has been done and will be done by certainly the team at Praxis, but also lots of other organisations who are also working in this space. So there's an awful lot, I think, that we can take from this that will help us to think about ways forward. Some of the other provisions within the Act, in addition to that two-tier system, that it's important to mention, and some of which you may already be aware of, is that it includes proposals for processing asylum claims overseas, and many of us will have seen the government announcement about the decision to process claims in Rwanda, and we will hear a little bit more about some of that from our speakers on the panel. It will also provide for increased use of reception centres, but also, really importantly, the criminalisation of people seeking asylum. And so I think one of the most pernicious aspects of the Act is the way in which it could lead to criminalising individuals who are fleeing tyranny, fleeing conflict, fleeing persecution, seeking to settle here, and they could inadvertently, as a result of this Act, end up being criminalised by it. So, there is an awful lot, I think, that we can discuss, and it will be really, really helpful if we can hear a little bit more from the experts. I speak as a person who works on these issues at the margins, and so what's really important is for us to be able to hear from some of our experts. So I'm going to just introduce them to you briefly, so to set you up for the wonderful things that they're going to share with us shortly. So our first panellist is Olivia, and she is one of the service users at Praxis. She's a member of the NRPF Action Group, and she's a service user representative on the Praxis Board of Trustees, so she's our panellist number one. Panellist number two is Sophie Lucas. She's a solicitor at Duncan Solicitors, and she acts on behalf of individual claimants and organisations, including NGOs, to challenge unlawful Home Office policies and decisions. Really importantly, she recently acted on behalf of the Public and Commercial Services Union, and that's a union that represents 80% of border force officials and Care for Calais in a challenge to the Home Office's pushback policy. And that successful activity resulted in the withdrawal of the policy. And Sophie's presently instructed in a leading challenge to the Home Office's new plan to remove asylum seekers from the UK to Rwanda. And our final panellist is Zrinka Bralo. Zrinka is the CEO of Migrants Organise, and she's been the CEO since 2001. Migrants Organise is an award-winning grassroots platform where migrants and refugees organise together for dignity and justice. Migrants Organise provides direct access to justice and support for the most vulnerable individuals and families, and facilitates numerous shared campaigns, such as Patients on Passports, Promote the Migrant Vote, which is a campaign to build electoral power, and the most recent, Solidarity Knows No Borders. Zrinka is a refugee from Sarajevo, where she was a journalist and where she worked with leading war correspondents during the siege of Sarajevo in the 90s. She's a founder of Women on the Move Awards and winner of the 2011 Voices of Courage Award by the Women Refugee Commission in New York. There is an awful lot more on her bio that I could go on, but she is properly distinguished. So this is just giving you a taste for what she has a lot of expertise in. So each of our panellists have been given a series of questions to consider. And I'm going to start with Olivia. And the questions that we've put to Olivia are for her to think about or to tell us what her main concerns for people coming to this country seeking asylum now that the Nationality and Borders Bill has become law, and for her to tell us what she thinks are the top priorities for resisting the new law. So Olivia, to you.
Thank you so much, David, for having me on the panel, and thank you for giving me this opportunity, Praxis, to be here for the AGM for 2022. I'm just going to start with one statement, and I'm drawing this statement from what answer I just gave this evening, and it's about the system and policies. So the system and policies, that's what really designs what affects us as people who are coming here to seek policies, to seek safety. But all I have to say is that we cannot give up. The fight will continue. This is just like a football tournament. There's never been a time when they say that there's not going to be, not even football, but any tournament that it has ended. But what we have to do, we've got to buy new players, we've got to get new tools and fight until we get our rights. So the impact of the Nationality and Borders Act on people fleeing conflict and seeking safety is huge. The Act is stripping people seeking safety a chance to do so. Even just from the point of view of mental health, people are fleeing trauma. They need to feel safe to be able to recover and rebuild their shattered lives. The Act instead will subject them to no recourse to public funds, and people living in precarious conditions like these with no access to government support, it's going to be very hard for people to survive. Families will not be able to access adequate housing and other forms of support, and they will be left with nowhere safe to live, with no food, at risk of homelessness. So how can they survive? And because of more restricted family reunification rights, families will be broken up. Children will be separated from their parents and siblings. So a government that proposes this plan does not see people fleeing conflict as human. People in power need to understand that when people cross a border, a dangerous border, such as the Channel, they are putting their lives at risk. They wouldn't do it if they didn't feel as if their life was on the line and they had no other option. Instead, more people will be at risk of detention and deportation and will be shipped away to countries like Rwanda. I think there's already a program in place. So people are already feeling scared. This act is out just to criminalize people seeking safety. The Lords showed that this police was not human. But why did MPs feel as if they had a mandate to put people's lives at risk? What is the purpose of being an elected representative if not to help those who are in need? We need to question the MPs. Why is protection not the focus of the Act? We need to stand for ourselves and for those who are yet to come looking for safety. And to face the consequences of this Act and to challenge it, we need more organizing, more organizations getting involved beyond the migrant and refugee sector. We need trade unions on board, businesses, individuals, celebrities, faith groups, education institutions and schools, the whole public, including the new generation. And why I'm saying including the new generation, these are the people who are going to be the MPs of tomorrow. They should know this, what their actions, the impact of their actions, and when they get to number 10 and wherever other, like the commons, they'll be able to reflect and be able to make useful decisions. We have to keep on being creative, the way we have to be able to get ideas. Because once the people are offered an opportunity to settle and heal, they will be able to give back. So we need to speak out and raise awareness, get people on board to support and campaign with us, against this act. But we can't be driven by our emotions. We need to put forward legal challenges to aspects of the act that are not legal, that breach UK's obligation and duty of care. If we only rely on our emotions, it's going to be very draining, especially for us people who are living the impact of this system. So, and when we speak out with the MPs and all other people who are promoting this law, we need to find a common ground. We are all part of our society and communities, no matter our differences, and no one should be excluded. We need to be able to celebrate our differences instead of letting this be a reason to divide us. People who have gone through the hardship of forced migration know the value of community. So we need to show those who are yet not in favor of migration that we all have in common, what we all have in common is our shared humanity. And perhaps remind them, if they also, especially if they are also migrant background, that if these laws were in place when they came in, they wouldn't have been able to get to where they are now. So I would like to end by saying that one person on their own is going to be eaten by a lion. But if we are many, we will scare the lion away. So just this month we have seen in Edinburgh that when people come together, they will have the power to stop the Home Office. You can stop raids, deportations and detention. So this act is a big blow to us. But together with everyone who believes in shared humanity and in a world where everyone can live in safety and dignity, we will be able to challenge it. Solidarity, solidarity. Will you stand with us? Thank you.
That was amazing, Olivia. Thank you so much. And that was, I believe, a real call to action, a bit of a rallying cry, and a really good way to kick off, I think, our panelists' presentations. So thank you so much, Olivia, for that moving and heartfelt, but really energetic. I'm loving the energies tonight. It's really good, it's really positive. So thank you so much for that, Olivia. Okay, so our next speaker is Sophie, and Sophie's questions are around the challenges to the Rwanda plan. So why is challenging the Rwanda plan so critical, and what do you think are the main avenues for legal challenges to the Act? So,
thanks for having me. I think that's quite hard to follow, and I'll try not to be too dry and legal about this. So as Debbie said, I work in public law, and my job is to bring challenges against Home Office policies and plans and decisions. I think the legal background to this Act is quite significant, and particularly the background to the Refugee Convention, which this Act attacks. The Refugee Convention, before the Refugee Convention, the international approach towards refugees was you had to pre-authorise your arrival, so you had to have documents in place. It was a pre-authorisation mechanism. It was moved to a needs-based system as part of the Refugee Convention. And that's why this Act is such a full frontal attack on the very premise of the Convention, because it penalises asylum seekers based on their mode of entry, and it penalises them both administratively and criminally. And it is a recognised position in international law and in our domestic courts that asylum seekers do have an element of choice in where they seek asylum, and they don't have to seek asylum at any particular point on their journey. So this Act reverses a number of really important court decisions in the UK and undermines the international position as it's been established. Just to touch on the pushback challenge that we issued, that was, as you might know, the Home Office's policy to forcibly redirect small boats crossing the Channel back into French waters. And we issued that challenge on behalf of the Public and Commercial Services Union, who represent 80% of Border Force officials, which was amazing to have that sort of varied client base and to sort of attack from that angle. That policy is now withdrawn, but the Act expands maritime enforcement powers, so there is scope for that, a pushback policy of that nature to be introduced in the future. So that's certainly an avenue of challenge that we're closely monitoring. And then just to touch on the Rwanda challenge that I'm working on at the moment. As you probably know, there's a plan to relocate asylum seekers who have come to the UK by dangerous means to Rwanda, not just to have their asylum claims processed, but to resettle there long term. And there are a number of legal reasons why that is extremely concerning, not just in breach of our UK's obligations under the Refugee Convention, but the European Convention on Human Rights and common law duties. We've obviously read through all the Home Office documents that they published last week on why they assessed Rwanda as a safe third country, and they're very concerning in what they don't reveal, and the absence of effective mechanisms and safeguards, the absence of legal advice in Rwanda and interpreters and a functioning appeal system. So we're bringing that challenge again on behalf of the Border Force Union and Charities Care for Calais and Detention Action. And there are a number of other ways in which we can challenge this Act in the future. I'll speak very briefly on a few areas. The first is the inadmissibility regime, which is actually already in place, but will be put on a statutory footing. And that is essentially a regime that provides for asylum seekers who arrive in the UK to have their claims deemed to be inadmissible because they travel through or have a connection to what the Home Office deems to be a safe third country. We have concerns that would again be in breach of our obligations under the Refugee Convention because it penalises asylum seekers based on their mode of entry. And absent adequate safeguards, it could also lead to the onward refoulement of asylum seekers, so where they're expelled to a country where their life and liberty are at risk. Secondly, as Debbie mentioned, the criminalisation of refugees based on their unlawful arrival, and that's an offence which could lead to imprisonment for up to 4 years. The two-tier system, which Debbie mentioned, at the moment asylum seekers and refugees are all treated the same, but it is sort of group 2, and it's not entirely clear, the parameters of group 2 aren't clearly specified, but they will have restricted access to family reunion rights, they will have 30 months of temporary protection, so the expiry of which they'll be expected to go back to their home country, which again raises a number of very serious legal concerns around being sent back to a country in which they're not safe. They won't have recourse to public funds unless they're destitute. So there are a number of ways in which this would breach the Refugee Convention, the European Convention on Human Rights, and lastly, the fast-track appeals process for those in detention. This is really concerning because a very similar scheme was introduced a number of years ago, which was found in the UK courts to be procedurally unfair in a challenge issued by Detention Action. So an accelerated process by which detained asylum seekers or recognised refugees would have to claim their appeal rights within 5 working days. There are so many reasons why access to justice is such a problem within immigration detention centres, and why this could lead to mean it's very difficult to access justice and to have a fair trial. So we're looking very closely at that, and will be once that comes into force. These challenges are difficult because this is primary legislation, so the court will be very reluctant to find against the provision which is seen to have a democratic mandate. The constitution of the courts has shifted, they are less activist, and they are deferring to parliamentary sovereignty in a much bigger way. But there is reason to be hopeful. There are a lot of practitioners who are ready to challenge these policies and practices as they come into force. And it is really great to build coalitions, like Olivia was saying, building a coalition with the union that represents border force officials is not something that I ever anticipated. So to have them on board and to have the Home Office workers saying we don't want to do this is really powerful. So expanding that kind of coalition outside of this immediate sphere is going to be really important in these sorts of legal challenges.
Sophie. There's a lot of hope, I think, coming through from our first two speakers. A lot of hope from Olivia and the rallying cry, but also a lot of hope from Sophie, sort of highlighting the potential for action, for further alliances and for further coalitions, which is sounding really, really positive. So I'm now going to go to our final speaker, Zrinka, Bralo, and the questions that we've put to her kind of build on this issue around the coalitions and the alliances that can be built. And the questions for you, Zrinka, were what could resistance to this act look like, and how can we build a movement for migrant justice, and what are the opportunities that you see for this over the coming years? So to you.
Thank you, Debbie, and congratulations everyone on actually doing the annual general meeting after 2 years in real life, as we say, not on Zoom, and well done. And Praxis is a sister organisation to Migrants Organise, so we really feel your pain as well as your successes. We are already resisting. This is resistance. This is resistance. And I think the difference between me and Olivia is 25 years. This could have been me 5 years ago, or I could have been on a plane to Rwanda next week, or in 2 weeks' time if I were right now. So I think we all have a personal way that connects us to this struggle. And our resilience is our resistance. This is what we do, building each other's resilience in community. Even COVID couldn't stop us. Is how we're going to win. And to quote Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it's done. And so we need to find in our resilience ways of coming together, supporting each other, platforming each other in a completely new ways. And we need to find ways of how we take action, because power in organizing, and that's what we proudly do, is an ability to act. And action is everything that has some kind of reaction. So tonight is an action, and powerful action, because it's going to have a reaction of all of us, and we're all going to go inspired and stronger to do more good stuff out there. And that's what solidarity means. That's a kind of actionable solidarity, and everyone can do a little bit. So the movement that we're building is not some kind of lowest common denominator where we agreed on a couple of things and we worked really hard. It's the sum of all of our powers. And that's how we need to start thinking about it. We also need to understand that we have superpowers, because the government has just passed like 5 different pieces of legislation against people like us. So there's a crime and police bill, their abandoning act, sorry, thank you, Duncan. Then they're abandoning the Human Rights Act. Come on. Then Nationality and Borders Act. And there are a few other pieces of legislation that were coming through that were all about restricting freedoms and rights, especially looking at global majority citizens that we are. So to me, trying to look at it from a different kind of, Stranger Things, like the opposite view, from the other side, it means to me something completely different. It's the government who's scared. It's the government who's scared, and that's why they're putting so many pieces of legislation to contain us. And the scariest, the person who's scared most is Priti Patel, the Home Secretary. Because despite all the popular sentiment and goodwill and welcome that we've seen with Ukrainians, and before that last year with people fleeing from Afghanistan, she still pushed through and steamrolled through House of Lords. And I'm not going to forget and forgive, and they will not forget and forgive. You just don't do that. The cost for our democracy is too high. And we have to remember that when we organize, when we provide direct action and support for people, which is advice, which is small acts of resistance. I once in the hospital, just as a patient, went in and folded down a big pull-up banner that says we're charging people. And because I'm white and white-haired and old, people were just thinking, oh, she must be somebody who's very important here. And then I put it on Twitter and people loved it. So we have to enter all spheres of public life and our communities to protect our communities, to protect people. Last Saturday, we were directing on Twitter action in Dalston to stop the police that were doing security checks on e-scooters who suddenly wanted to detain and deport two delivery riders. People surrounded them and pushed them out of Dalston. And there's going to be more and more of those actions where we're going to have to be busybodies and work with people and on behalf of people to make sure that they have freedoms, that they can sustain their lives, that they get proper advice. Just because this is the law doesn't mean it's legitimate. And we need to do a lot of work to keep reminding people that what justice looks like, what dignity looks like. Because we know, and we're just not going to let the government or anyone else to gaslight, because with the government we have quite active right-wing press that are trying to rewrite the story. So we just need to keep telling this positive story. And the problem that we have is that there are good people do good work quietly, and that's the problem. So we need to learn how we platform each other, because if somebody feels a little bit embarrassed about the good work that they're doing, then I'm going to tell their story. And then somebody else is going to tell somebody else's story. But each one needs to bring another one, and we need to start bringing more people into this. We're going to have a local election. We have local elections. We're going to have another general election in 2 years' time. As charities, we can campaign on our issues. We should not be self-censoring, and we must not be scared, because it's the government who's scared of us. So in June, we are organizing in the Solidarity Knows No Borders community. We decided to organize a week of actions, and we're constantly doing week of actions. And I just got a fantastic message from Lesbian and Gays for Migrants that they're going to have a homo office week. And I just can't wait to see how that's going to look like. They're going to dress up, they're going to do public theatre and campaigning. People are going to have picnics, people are going to go with other people who are still forced to report because they're on bail. Why they're on bail when no crimes was committed? Like, we are the ones who need to start calling this out. The Daily Mail called me out because I called the Rwanda plan kidnapping. I did not want to share that because I don't want to give them clickbaits. But I'm doing something right. if I'm disturbing Daily Mail, and we should all be disturbing immoral Daily Mails of this world. So, of course, we've learned, as Sally said, to be digital, so everybody is on Twitter, on Instagram. Find the community, follow Solidarity Knows No Borders hashtag. We've got a really nice democratic design that Olivia is sporting here. And just join in. And if you want to do some more serious organizing, we're here. We can have conversations, we can start from where you're at, and there are groups around the country organizing, and we come together, and it's a wonderful celebration. So we need to be celebrating our power and building our resilience. And I promise you, in 2-3 years' time, when this is over, you'll remember that you heard it here first, the Praxis AGM, and that you're part of bringing it to an end. So thank you, and let's do it.
Thank you, Zrinka. I mean, who knew that having a discussion about an act which is so problematic could be so inspiring and uplifting as this discussion has been. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions. Sorry, let me say that again. We've got a couple of minutes now for questions from the floor for our speakers. So, does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask either to Olivia, to Zrinka, or to Sophie? So please don't be shy. Right at the back.
My name is Bralo. My question for Zrinka. My name is Zrinka. Even before this bill had become successfully act, my understanding, it was challenging for proper citizens, not for majority, but for us. But now I see this is like a mission impossible for them, because it's difficult to explain why former asylum seeker, when he or she crosses the border to look for refugee, asylum seeker, when he or she crosses a dozen of countries around the globe looking for warmer place or more for him or for she. He or she is not asylum seeker anymore, apparently. So it's difficult to challenge, and my understanding why they come anyway. What's wrong with France or Spain or Germany? Just take, if you have grounds, take status and come to join your family in the Ukraine. So my question is, how do you rearrange your abilities in light of the new Nationality and Borders Bill which has become the law?
Sorry, you were very, very close to the microphone, so I was only able to pick up a few bits of what you were saying, so maybe could you hold it a little bit further away? Were you essentially saying what is the difference between an asylum seeker, or how do we define an asylum seeker? When you cross the border, you're seen as one thing, and then if you do something else, you're seen as another? Was that the gist of your question?
No, my question is, what is the new approach will do any proper solicitor to challenge this act? But there is to be something new for them in their field, not like it used to be.
Okay. I think he was saying, what is the new approach that is going to be taken to challenging the act? That's essentially what we were saying. Okay, so I might go to Sophie, because this feels like it could be a legal question.
Yeah, I think these challenges will need a new approach because this is, as I said, it's primary legislation. So we are going to be looking at the policies that sit under it and how those policies are implemented in practice. But the approach will need to be, I think as Olivia was saying, we need to be objective and realistic about what is achievable in the courts. Not only because this is now primary legislation, but because the approach of the courts has shifted. So we'll need to organise really effectively and efficiently to get, for example, in systemic challenges, to get really hard evidence from our NGO clients, to have access to a wide range of clients with compelling fact patterns, to have greater access to individuals who need us to work very quickly. And you know, I'm working at the moment as part of this Rwanda challenge. We have referrals from individuals in detention who've just been served with notices of intent saying they're being considered for removal to Rwanda. Accessing those individuals quickly and having their documents sent over, getting them signed up, taking witness statements, that involves actually quite a lot of people because we need people who are able to go in and help facilitate and support them, and interpreters, and a lot needs to happen very, very quickly. Those are real challenges because all the time frames under this act are getting shorter and access to legal advice is getting harder deliberately. And so it requires, you know, we're working very closely with Calais, but also a number of other NGOs on the ground, and that's invaluable to us to be able to communicate with these people quickly and offer them support after difficult calls. So I think the approach we need to take is to work cohesively and quickly and efficiently and identify people who need help and identify the experts in the field. I hope that answers your question, but I think that approach we need to take is one of extreme speed and solidarity and building those coalitions like Olivia was saying.
Thank you. Great answer. I think I've got time for possibly one more because we've already got to 7:30. So, question at the back.
Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists, and particularly to my colleague, the inestimable treasure of Africa, Olivia. Well done to you. And questions, I think, Sophie, I'm going to come to you on this. I mean, you as a lawyer, do we really have a case to fight? And what's the chances of winning? Secondly, how much would the human rights record of President Paul Kagame matters to this fight? Because how would Rwanda asylum seeker in UK be sent back to the country they are running from? And you know, dictators are quite connected. They are best of friends. The man in Uganda, President Museveni, he's got a romantic attachment to Paul Kagame. Could you imagine a Ugandan refugee here sent back to Rwanda? And lastly, President Paul Kagame has been challenged on several occasions. You know, President Lukashenko of Belarus hijacked a plane just to arrest one person. Was it last year or 2 years ago? President Kagame did the same thing. Why is he an interesting man? You condemn Lukashenko for his heart. And Paul Kagame did the same thing. You are going to bear with him. So, are these really points that matters in your fight? Thank you.
Wow, that's a big question. I'll start with Sophie because it was directed at you, but Olivia, you have been named in the question, only because you are venerated, obviously, but also if you have anything to add. So I'm going to get all of the panellists to say something broadly about this and also any final thoughts that you might have. So Sophie, if I start with you.
I think your second and third questions almost answered your first, because as you put it, there are serious concerns about how the Home Office can categorise Rwanda as a safe third country, and for that reason we are optimistic about this challenge, cautiously optimistic, as we always are in this climate. But on reviewing the Home Office's own policy documents, it's very clear that it's a cursory overview of the human rights situation in Rwanda at best. There is not a comprehensive and meaningful assessment of what it would mean for an asylum seeker to be relocated to Rwanda. And there are a myriad of concerns around key vulnerabilities, potential victims of trafficking, the support they could receive there for LGBTQ individuals, and their potential discrimination there. Also for asylum seekers from Iran, Iraq, from Middle Eastern countries who have not been present in Rwanda. Rwanda doesn't have asylum seekers and refugees from those countries. So the level of integration and support and potential discrimination is just not really considered by the Home Office. There are huge concerns around freedom of expression and association. We know that there are organisations including UNHCR and Human Rights Watch who are concerned about political opponents and how they're treated. We know that refugee camp inhabitants who have protested about conditions have been injured and killed in previous years. So I think you're right to point out these clear contradictions and points of concern, and for that reason we do think this challenge has legs. We have to be realistic about what the courts will and won't do, but equally, if anything, the Home Office's own documents have given us some level of confidence because they are so inadequate. And that's what I'm working on at the moment, and hope to be able to feed back some positive news. We're really concerned about the imminence of flights, and so we're working very quickly to issue this challenge. And yeah, we have to just hope that the courts can see that perspective, and I think we've got very compelling evidence to present. So,
thank you so much. And Olivia, anything to add?
I think, can you hear me? I'm just going to appreciate my two colleagues because we sit in the same space when we are coming here for our groups, and those are the strong brains you have who are going to fight this bill. I really appreciate Remy and my other brother for what they have asked, and that is the same I would ask as well. So as Zrinka mentioned, that we have to all come together and work hard and bring out what we know. So these are the people who are behind here to be supported by Praxis and other organizations, and we are ready to fight this bill. That's all I can say. Thank you.
And final words. So there's already a group that is organising protest against the airlines that will be carrying out these deportations. But we don't know who's going to be doing charter flights. So the corporate watch just put a list of everybody who's ever done any deportation. So we're going to target them all. And this is where everyone can join in, either in person in front of their offices or online as customers. And we've done that with TUI, and they've pulled out Jamaican deportations. interpretations. So we have power to start rejecting these things and under the banner don't make profit out of this. But also, what this government made a big mistake is sort of revealing itself and some previous injustices to global majority communities that are already here, and they will pay the price, and we need to work on that. So the Sikh Council of Britain, having realized that Clause 9, which is the deprivation of citizenship, has actually been part of the law since 1981, and so citizenship could have been deprived since 1981 to people who are slightly different or from somewhere else. As the only difference this year was in this act is that they can do it now without telling you, and you have no right of appeal. So the Sikh Council of Britain has now said to all MPs who voted for this act, they're no longer welcome in their temples. And just calculate how many votes they're going to lose. And so the next, we need to get the churches, we need to get the mosques and other trade unions to take a similar action and to say, if you do this, you're dividing a country, our communities and our families. And if there are 9.4 million people from all different backgrounds, that's 1 in 6 in this country. That's 1 in 6, and we're all connected and related to the other 5. So we have a lot of power, but a lot of work to do. And so we start with what might seem like a little thing in the emergency that a friend has just outlined, and also in disbelief for many of us, because we just, until the last minute, many people could not believe that this is happening. And so we start believing in it, and we start doing it, and then we're gonna win.
Unfortunately, I have to bring this discussion to an end, even though I've been thoroughly enjoying myself, I have to say, listening to all of these rousing speeches, and also all of the potential for action, and the potential for coalition, and the potential for disruption. I'm a politically restricted individual. I work for a political individual. I have to be very careful about what I say, but I think it's fine for other people in the room to talk about the different actions that they're going to take. That's fine, and it's fine for me to nod and clap and be excited as I do constantly. So listen, I just want to say there is a lot of positivity in the room. There's a lot of potential for action, and that's a very good point at which to end, I think, a conversation like this about very difficult situations and challenging situations that the Act has fostered upon us. And I also do want to make sure that I shout out the NRPF Action Group, because the NRPF Action Group has been working incredibly hard and has had some real successes, as they've had, and Olivia, this is to you and everyone else in the room, in relation to the success around support for those on free school meals, and building on that action to take on other initiatives and to take on other activities. So there's a lot of action that's already happening within Praxis. There's clearly an awful lot of action that's happening with Migrants and Organise. I've known Zrinka for a long time, and I knew that her coming here would be as rousing as she has been. So we will continue to explore the different alliances and coalitions that we can build. But can I just ask you all to join me in thanking our 3 amazing speakers, Sophie, Olivia, and Zrinka.